citizens, and welcome to Unknown.
I'm Jason McClellan. I'm here with Shane Hurd today. Thanks for hanging out with us. Shane recently released his debut book titled Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, A Beginner's Guide to Researching UFOs. So today, Shane's going to spend some time telling us about his book. But before we get to the book, Shane, I'd love to talk with you for a bit just about UFO investigations in general and also a bit of your personal history as well. Cool?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. So before you jumped into actual investigation, when did you start researching the UFO topic?
Well, I would say, I always had an interest even from childhood, but it was not very strong, just, kind of in the back of my mind. And then as I grew, had a family and a career and starting all that, and just didn't really have the time to pay attention. But once my daughter grew and had my career under control, I had a little time to, look into things that interested me. And I think the thing that really popped that interest off was the Phoenix Lights incident here in Arizona. I was a resident, I've lived here 40 years, so I was here during that time. And even though I didn't see it that evening, much ado about that case occurred in the media.
Right.
And, it happened over a long period of time, for months and months and months. And so even if you were just not even a casual interest in UFOs, it was still in the nightly news. And I mean, it got a lot of attention here. So that did grab my attention. And I thought, there is really something to this I need to look into more fully. And that's kind of where it started for me. And then, about that time you had, of course, X-Files was going on. And then other UFO TV programs began, like UFO Files. And so I would watch that stuff. But it wasn't until about 2010 where I really got into it with earnest. And that was really the result of reading Leslie Kean's book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Public Officials Go on the Record. And I followed that up with Richard Dolan's 2-volume set of UFOs in the National Security State. And once I did that, I was pretty much convinced that there was a reality to this and that I would like to continue it further. And eventually, after studying, reading every book and, movie and documentary and everything I could get my hands on for a couple of years, I kind of felt like, well, now what do I do with this knowledge? and I looked for some kind of opportunity to really engage and do more than just consume, information. And that's when MUFON really got on my radar. And in 2015, I did join MUFON. And then in 2017, I became an investigator. And then earlier this year, I became an assistant director of Arizona MUFON. So it's kind of been my path and my journey, and I'm super enjoying it. It's just so much fun.
So stepping back after the Phoenix Lights and decided to start researching the topic, do you remember that process and what you actually did to, actively look into the topic? Like, how did you come across Leslie Kean's book, for example? Like, were you searching on the internet? What were you doing to figure out, how to get this information or where to get this information?
Yeah, great point. The internet was, certainly well along at that time. And, but I don't think Facebook was really much of a deal then. But
no, it was not.
What I actually, yeah. So the first book I saw, and I was literally just walking through Barnes and Noble, and I saw the book on Roswell from course, Owen Burns, The Day After Roswell, I think is what it was called. And, I'd heard of Roswell, kind of what it was. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe I'll look into that, start there. And that's how I got going. But when I read that book, I was kind of disappointed. I just felt like, some of it, seemed plausible, but some of it didn't. And I kind of got discouraged and was thinking, boy, I hope, I'm not wasting my time here. Yeah. And then that's when the second book I found actually was Leslie. So that kind of renewed my confidence. But yeah, it was tough back then. I didn't really know anybody in the topic. There was no connecting like on Facebook, that kind of thing. It was really just on my own. And frankly, that process was difficult and it was random and I was taking shots in the dark. And so, some stuff I was just totally, nonsense. And then other stuff was, pretty factual. And then some of it, was really fascinating to me, very scientific and some really, valid information. You could just kind of see it almost like, spread out before me. It was on the right hand, you had wheat-like good information, and then on the left, was chaff-like bad information. And it took a while to go through the process to kind of how to differentiate between the two. But, eventually I got there. But it was a bit of a struggle, and I feel bad for people trying to jump in on this even now because there's just so much to wade through and you just don't even know where to start and what's relevant and what's nonsense, So that was kind of my journey or how I got going.
So as you were on your journey and you decided to, take it further, what was it about UFO investigations specifically that appealed to you?
Yeah, that is the thing that appeals to me. I guess, when I got going on this, I was driven by this same curiosity most people have. For me, it was more the nuts and bolts side. It's like, what is that machine in the air that is unexplained? I gotta find out what that is. That certainly is what had drove me to look into it. And then again, having had the experience of consuming all this information and knowledge, but nowhere to use it or apply it was very frustrating to me. And that's why I tended to gravitate toward the investigation side, because here you can do something about it, not just, learn, but now apply and maybe help move this whole thing forward. So that's what attracted me most. And again, the scientific side of it, or, the investigative side, where you're applying logic and reason and deduction and all of those things. And it's not just, belief, it's action and it's, evidence and it's proof. And I don't know, that just appeals to me more.
Yeah. And here we are in 2020. So you've got many years now of UFO investigation under your belt, but again, it's 2020, and we've talked about this before on this show, but now that we're a couple more months into it, what does the UFO investigation landscape look like during COVID?
Yeah, that's a rough one because it has limited our ability to go investigate in person, which, as a MUFON investigator, you do the majority of your work on the computer and research that way. However, there is absolutely a percentage of the time that you go meet with people, you go on site in those locations. I've had cases where, we brought out our Geiger counters and our, mel meters and, a sextant and just, there's some really neat things that you can apply to a case, but you have to be there and present. Yeah. And of course, the seriousness of the case dictates whether you do that. But even to interview someone, to do so over the phone is fine or Skype is fine, but definitely in person, there's so much more to communication than the words we utter, right? And so it is better if you can do that in person. And so with COVID, I've had a couple cases where, boy, I really wanted to go out there and meet with the people and talk to them and stuff, where it just wasn't safe to do so, not for them, not for myself. And, unfortunately, that's the world we're living in right now. Right. But, it's temporary. We're going to get through this, get around it, and we'll be back to doing, in-person stuff.
I like your optimism. All right. Well, let's get into the book now. You totally have to be. All right. Let's jump into the book. Now, what made you, you'd gone into UFO research, made the jump to UFO investigation. What was it that made you decide to write a book about your UFO research?
Yeah, really two things. Of course, just the personal side of it that, hey, I would like to be an author, and I would like to record all of this information and knowledge that I had gathered over the years and kind of document it and leave a legacy for my granddaughters, that kind of thing. So selfishly, that definitely was part of my motivation. Sure. But the other side, and what really what my focus is, and it hasn't stopped with the writing this book, and that is to educate people who are newly interested in this topic. And why I think that's particularly important right now is a couple things. One is we're living in a time of unprecedented release of information about UFOs from the government, a variety of agencies, and then the mainstream media is taking it seriously. So this has, in effect, been a signal to the general public that the taboo of demonstrating an interest in UFOs has, if not been eliminated, at least reduced greatly, so that, a person can inquire and learn about it and not fear that ridicule. And so my thinking is that as these revelations continue to come in that we've seen through TTSA and the Navy and the Department of Defense and all these things, it's really a special time. We're just, it's been 75 years of the lid being clamped down tight. Now it's come off, and it's really wonderful. It is. It's so fascinating. And I think it's going to draw a lot more people to the field. And that being said, I would hope that my book could help them not have the experience I had up front and the frustration with determining, what's good information and bad information. What are good sources and what are bad sources, and how do you tell the difference, and all those sorts of things. What are the big issues in ufology? What are the minor issues? What are the politics of it? And it kind of goes on and on, but all of these are important, to get a good understanding of the topic and to begin to educate yourself. So that's really the point of my book, is to help newly interested people wade through the crap, not fall down rabbit holes, but get a good solid lock on what ufology is all about, so that they can, be educated with good high quality information versus, having to wade through a lot of the nonsense first.
You include some classic UFO cases in the book. Do you think that having a familiarity with classic cases and UFO history in general is important when it comes to researching this topic?
Absolutely essential. And it's like any topic, history matters, and it can guide and direct you in terms of the present and the future. And so what these cases do for us, first of all, that's all we've had for those 75 years, right? Or these classic cases. Yeah. But they all yield information about UFOs, and they have different strengths in terms of each case. So, for example, one classic case might, have really good photographic evidence, especially like, from the 50s and 60s, and where you didn't have computers and you can fake photos more easily, that kind of a thing. Or, some cases have super strong witness testimony, and the credentials of the people involved really add to it. Some of it is like mass sightings. That's a rare thing, and it's incredibly powerful. And so what the historical cases do is acquaint us with what is again, good and relevant information versus what isn't. And it educates people about the investigative process. It's a difficult thing when you're not there and you didn't see it or have that experience, but you're charged with investigating it and trying to determine what it was, if it was something otherworldly or if it was something prosaic. I mean, and the only way to get there is, eyewitness testimony and trace evidence and video evidence and a process of elimination, and just there's all these moving pieces all of the time to these cases, and sometimes they're strong and sometimes they're weak, but as an investigator you have to follow the evidence that you have and make a conclusion based on that. So every case is unique and different, and some are really fun because you get a lot of stuff, and others are kind of boring because you just don't have much to go on. Some are super frustrating because you can't say what it is and what it wasn't. So what are you left with? So, I mean, that's the topsy-turvy world of investigating. But again, classic cases and our history is a big part of it, and it's absolutely essential. So that's why I include that in the book, to acquaint people with and I selected cases that I thought were strong, and I think they're generally agreed upon as very strong cases in the UFO community. So again, a person just getting acquainted with this, they need to understand the history of it as well.
Yeah, really well said, and I completely agree with you on that. You point out various obstacles that researchers are almost certain to encounter, like hoaxes, misidentifications, disinformation, disagreements among researchers, and more. So was there an obstacle that was more prevalent than others to you personally when you were beginning your journey into UFO research?
Yeah, I think it was the ridicule factor because, I had a strong religious background, and I knew that my interest in this would have been poo-pooed. Yeah. So that's one aspect of it. Of course, I was concerned what my family would think and my friends, and then again, my career. I'm still in the midst of my career, and it's a technical career, and by far the majority of people that I work with are highly educated. They're master's degrees, and they're engineers and that kind of thing. So people who, think critically and get it. And so I was concerned how it might reflect on me that, I'm going to be a kook or something because I'm into UFOs. But, gladly, none of that transpired the way I thought it would. And in fact, I've got nothing but positive comments and support. So for me, that was the challenge. And again, with this book, I'm hoping that people will, understand that if you educate yourself and you have facts, when people, do oppose it or ridicule in some way, you can come back with, good solid information, because anybody that's going to ridicule is not ridiculing you because they know more facts than you. They don't know anything. They're totally ignorant. They're just making fun of you. They think that they have a case to make fun of you. But when you come back and defend yourself with fact and good information, that usually shuts that kind of stuff down right away. So to me, it's all about education and understanding, and that way you can protect yourself and move forward.
That really goes right into the book's final chapter. The book's final chapter is called Follow the Evidence. And I mean, that would seem like a no-brainer, but tell me why you thought it was and is important to remind UFO researchers to follow the evidence.
Yeah, I think it's just such an important thing. The fact is, there's more information out there than you could, amass or digest in a lifetime. And a lot of it is not good information. Yeah. But there is good information. There's mountains of good evidence to support the view that UFOs are real, and that's that. There's no question about it. But the problem is people develop their own thinking about what this is and why they're here and all of those things, which is natural, and I understand that. But that's putting the cart before the horse. I talk about the 5 W's. What, where, and when, which to me, that's what we need to focus on, because that yields actionable data. We can measure that, what date, what time, what geographic location, what happened, blah, blah, blah. You can aggregate that. You can, use that to study with. You can draw conclusions from it. And I think those are the things that you can treat in a scientific way. You can apply the scientific method to the what, where, and the when. Now, the who and the why, which is, ultimately where we want to go, of course, it's too soon for that. But I think if we really do get a handle on the what, where, when, and how type stuff, the who and the why will either become self-evident, or we can make some really strong theories that are supportable, or maybe if there isn't some others, that at that point they'll make themselves known to us. So I think that's the danger, is that some people allow their belief in what or who or why this is happening to cloud the use of evidence, which is the what, where, and the when side. So I think that's always where the slope gets slippery for researchers, and it's okay to speculate and kind of have fun with the idea, but we got to act responsibly, and we got to make sure if we're spouting stuff off, that what we're spouting off is evidence and fact and proof, and then anything else being to make really clear that is our opinion or our theory, and one of many.
Well, Shane, thanks a bunch for sharing this insight into your book, and I hope people who are interested in UFO research check it out. Shane's book, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, A Beginner's Guide to Researching UFOs, is available now on Amazon. Well, citizens, that's going to do it for this episode. You can find more episodes of Unknown on all the major podcast platforms. And you can always find this show and our other shows at rogueplanet.tv, because Unknown is a Rogue Planet production. rogueplanet.tv is your home for all the strange. Feel free to reach out to us if you've got a story you want to share, if there's a story or topic you'd like us to cover on this show, or anything else. You can find us on social media, or simply email us at contact@rogueplanet.tv. Thanks again for hanging out with us today. I'm Jason McClellan.
I'm Shane Hurd.
Do us a favor, friends. Always treat the UFO subject with the cautious and responsible skepticism it deserves. Question everything. Have the courage to form your own opinions. Keep truth as the focus of your quest, even if the truth conflicts with your opinions. And, of course, stay strange.